The message that would change humanity's fate arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. It came through the special communication channel that Earth had been given when they joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago. The channel had never been used before. It was meant only for the gravest emergencies. Tom Baker was just starting his shift at the Global Communications Center in Geneva when the alert lit up his entire console in bright red. His coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, but he barely noticed. His fingers flew across the holographic keyboard as he verified the signal's authenticity. It was real. Within 30 minutes, the world's top officials gathered in an emergency virtual conference. The message from the Galactic Council played on their screens, and the alien representative's voice trembled with fear, something no one had ever heard before from the usually calm and composed council members. "A grave threat has been released," the alien said. Its translator struggled to keep up with its rapid speech. "The ancient Doomsday virus of the Forgotten Ones has escaped containment. 3 civilizations have already fallen. The virus moves through space at incredible speed, corrupting all biological life it encounters. Our best predictions show it will reach Earth's sector in approximately 60 days. The room fell silent. Humanity had only recently learned they weren't alone in the universe, and now they faced extinction alongside their cosmic neighbors. The council representative continued, explaining how the virus had been created by an ancient civilization as a last resort weapon, but they had vanished before using it. For millions of years, it had remained safely contained in a facility on a dead world. Until now. We have already lost contact with the Bright Ring systems," the alien continued. "Their entire civilization, gone in days. The Shield Makers and the Crystal Singers soon followed. These were species that had mastered space travel when Earth's life was still in its oceans, and even they could not stop it." The president of the Global Unity Council, Michael Ross, leaned forward in his chair. "What defenses have been tried?" he asked, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. The alien's response was not encouraging. "Everything. Energy fields, quantum barriers, atomic restructuring. Nothing stops it. It adapts too quickly. The virus seems to possess an intelligence of its own, finding ways around every defense we create. There was a pause. "We recommend you spend these last days with your loved ones. We are sorry." But President Ross wasn't ready to accept defeat. As soon as the transmission ended, he turned to his advisors. "Get me our best minds on this. I want virologists, biologists, quantum physicists, everyone." Humanity didn't climb out of the caves by giving up when things got tough. The response was immediate. Research centers worldwide began redirecting all their resources to studying the limited data the Council had shared about the virus. The World Health Organization transformed its headquarters into a command center for the global effort. Military vessels were dispatched to set up early warning stations in space, ready to collect samples as soon as the virus entered detection range. In the following days, the public was informed. Unlike many disaster scenarios governments had planned for, there was no panic. Humanity had faced extinction-level threats in their imagination so many times through books, movies, and games that the real thing was met with a strange sort of readiness. Instead of chaos, there was organization. Instead of fear, there was determination. Dr. James Miller watched all of this from his small lab in Montana, where he had spent the last 15 years studying viral communication patterns. While the rest of the world focused on ways to destroy or block the virus, something in the Council's data caught his eye. The way the virus adapted, the speed of its evolution. It reminded him of something he had seen before. He pulled up his old research files, comparing them to the alien data. His eyes widened as patterns began to emerge. The virus wasn't just attacking randomly. It was trying to talk. As he looked at the clock on his wall, he knew humanity had just under 2 months to learn an entirely new language, the language of an alien virus that had already killed billions. Picking up his phone, he dialed the emergency response number that had been set up for scientists with potential solutions. "This is Dr. James Miller," he said when they answered. "I need to speak with the response team. I think we've been looking at this all wrong. We don't need to fight this thing. We need to understand it." The Montana Research Facility buzzed with unusual activity as Dr. Miller explained his theory to Dr. Anna Thompson. The two scientists had worked together for years, but never with such urgency. Screens around them displayed complex viral patterns from both Earth's common cold and the alien virus data. "Look at this," Dr. Miller pointed to one of the displays. "The way it moves, the way it changes, it's not attacking. It's trying to establish contact." He pulled up another screen showing Earth virus behavior. "It's just like how our viruses evolved, but on a much bigger scale." Dr. Thompson leaned closer to the screen, her eyes widening as she saw the patterns. She had spent a decade studying how viruses communicated with host cells, and what James was showing her matched her own research perfectly. "It's speaking too loudly," she said quietly, like someone shouting in a library. "The cells aren't dying because they're being attacked. They're dying from the shock of the communication attempt." The emergency response team arrived within hours. They set up additional equipment in the small lab, transforming it into a hub of activity. Dr. Miller and Dr. Thompson worked tirelessly, explaining their theory to skeptical officials. Most other research teams worldwide were still focusing on ways to destroy the virus. "You want to talk to it." General Adams, the military liaison, looked at them like they had lost their minds. "This thing has wiped out 3 civilizations." "Yes," Dr. Miller replied calmly, "because no one tried to understand it. Look at human history. How many times have we turned enemies into allies just by learning to communicate?" Dr. Thompson pulled up a new display. "We humans are uniquely qualified for this. Our cells have been dealing with viruses for millions of years. We've developed complex communication systems with them. Some viruses even help us now. They're part of our gut biology, our immune system." The general wasn't convinced, but Dr. Robert Wilson, a quantum computing specialist who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. "They're right. I've been running simulations of the virus's behavior. It's not random. There's a pattern, a purpose. It's just too alien for most species to recognize." The team worked through the night, fueled by coffee and the urgency of their mission. They pulled up data from hundreds of Earth viruses, comparing communication patterns. Dr. Wilson's quantum computers processed millions of simulations, looking for matches between Earth's viral language and the alien virus's attempts at communication. Around dawn, Dr. Thompson noticed something extraordinary. "James, look at this." She pointed to a particular protein sequence in common cold antibodies. "This structure, it's almost like a universal translator. Our bodies developed it to talk to cold viruses, but its pattern, it could work with the alien virus too." The discovery energized the team. They began modifying the protein sequence, trying to create a bridge between the alien virus's loud, destructive attempts at communication and the quieter, more compatible methods used by Earth's viruses. News of their work spread quickly. Other research teams began shifting their focus from destruction to communication. The Galactic Council was puzzled by this approach. No other species had even considered it. They had all seen the virus as a weapon to be destroyed, not a visitor to be understood. Dr. Miller worked at his desk, reviewing the latest test results. A small sample of the virus was expected to reach their warning stations in just a few weeks. They needed a solution before then. Looking at a photo on his desk of his daughter playing with their dog, he smiled. Humans had learned to communicate with wolves, turning them into faithful companions over thousands of years. Maybe they could do the same with this virus. "The deadliest weapon ever created," he muttered to himself, "and all it really wants is to talk." Dr. Thompson walked over with fresh coffee. "The quantum simulations are showing a 67% chance of successful communication using our modified protein sequence. It's not perfect, but it's hope," Dr. Miller finished. "And sometimes that's all humans need." He turned to the rest of the team. "Let's run it again. We need to be ready when that virus arrives." The galaxy thinks we're too primitive to handle this threat. Let's show them what primitive humans can do. The halls of the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva had never been so crowded. Scientists from every corner of Earth worked around the clock, their footsteps echoing through the building at all hours. In the main laboratory, Dr. Miller and his team had set up what they called the Babel Center, a place where they hoped to crack the language of an alien virus. Dr. Wilson's quantum computers hummed constantly, their cooling systems working overtime as they processed billions of viral interactions. Holographic displays filled the air with dancing patterns of protein structures and viral behavior. The team had 30 days left before the virus reached their sector. "Look at this pattern," Dr. Miller said, pointing to a particular simulation. "Every time the virus encounters a new cell type, it follows the same sequence. It's like someone trying different languages until they find one that works." He rubbed his tired eyes, having barely slept in days. Dr. Thompson nodded, studying the data. "But it's trying too hard. The force of its attempts is what's killing the cells." She pulled up another display, showing their modified protein sequence. "We need to teach it to whisper instead of shout." A young lab assistant rushed in, holding a tablet. "The warning stations just picked up the first trace samples of the virus. It's moving faster than we predicted. We only have 25 days now." The news sent a ripple of urgency through the team. Dr. Wilson immediately began adjusting his simulations for the new timeline. "The quantum computers are showing something interesting," he said after a few minutes. "When we combine the virus's approach with our common cold antibodies, there's a moment of harmony. It's brief, but it's there." They gathered around his screen, watching the simulation play out. The alien virus would approach a cell, begin its usual overwhelming communication attempt, but when the modified antibodies were present, something changed. The virus seemed to pause, adjust, and try a gentler approach. "It's learning," Dr. Miller whispered. "It's actually capable of learning new ways to communicate." He turned to Dr. Thompson. "Anna, remember how we discovered that cold viruses evolve to be less deadly over time? They learned that killing their hosts wasn't a good survival strategy." The team worked frantically to refine their approach. Each simulation brought them closer to a stable solution, but time was running out. The virus had already reached the outer warning stations, and the samples they received confirmed their theories. It wasn't just a weapon. It was trying to establish a symbiotic relationship. It just didn't know how to do it gently. News came in that other species were still trying to fight the virus with increasingly desperate measures. The Crystal Singers had attempted to use their advanced energy fields to destroy it, only to watch in horror as the virus adapted and used the energy to travel even faster. The remaining civilizations began to seal off entire sectors of space, abandoning outer colonies to their fate. But in Geneva, humanity took a different path. Dr. Miller and his team coordinated with research centers worldwide, sharing data and insights. They discovered that different human populations had slightly different responses to viral communications, giving them a broader range of potential solutions to work with. A breakthrough came late one night when Dr. Wilson's quantum computers revealed something unexpected. "The virus isn't just trying to communicate with cells," he announced, staring at his screen in amazement. "It's trying to upgrade them. The civilizations it destroyed. Their cellular structure was too rigid, too specialized. They couldn't adapt to the changes it was offering." Dr. Miller looked at the results with growing excitement. "But human cells are different. We're more flexible. Our bodies have been adapting to new viruses for millions of years." He turned to Dr. Thompson. "We don't need to just translate for the virus. We need to teach it how to be a good partner." As the team rushed to modify their approach based on this new understanding, alerts came in from the final warning stations. The virus would reach Earth in just 2 weeks. The race against time had entered its final phase, and humanity's solution would soon face its ultimate test. The discovery hit Dr. Thompson like a bolt of lightning during a routine analysis of human blood samples. She had been comparing different immune responses when she noticed something that made her hands shake with excitement. Running to the main lab, she nearly collided with Dr. Miller in the doorway. "James, we've been so focused on the common cold that we almost missed it." She pulled up her findings on the main display. "Look at human blood samples from people who've recovered from multiple viral infections. Their cells don't just have one way to talk to viruses, they have dozens." The main lab came alive as other scientists gathered around. Dr. Wilson quickly fed the new data into his quantum computers. The results made him lean back in his chair, eyes wide with understanding. "She's right. Other species in the galaxy, they're too perfect. Their immune systems are so advanced that they only have one way to deal with threats. But humans, we're messy," Dr. Miller finished, a smile spreading across his face. "We've kept every successful mutation, every adaptation we've ever developed. We're carrying around millions of years of viral communication methods in our cells." The team worked with renewed energy, examining blood samples from humans who had survived various viral infections. Each sample revealed new potential ways to communicate with the alien virus. Dr. Thompson focused on a particular protein sequence that appeared in people who had recovered from multiple infections. "It's like we have a universal translator built into our immune system," she explained to the gathered team. "Every time we survive a virus, our bodies learn a new dialect. And this protein sequence, it acts like a bridge between different viral communication methods." A call came in from the warning stations. They had less than a week now. The virus had accelerated again, having learned to use the quantum communication networks of fleeing alien ships to travel faster. But instead of causing panic, this news only confirmed their theory: the virus could learn and adapt. Dr. Wilson's computers churned out simulation after simulation, testing different combinations of human immune responses against the virus's communication attempts. "Look at this," he called out, pointing to a particular result. "When we combine the protein sequence Anna found with the adaptability patterns in human white blood cells, the virus actually slows down. It's like it recognizes something familiar." The team worked through the night, refining their approach. They discovered that human cells had something no other species possessed: the ability to dynamically switch between different communication methods. Where other species had evolved to have perfect but rigid immune systems, humans had kept their primitive but highly adaptable defenses. "It's like the difference between knowing one language perfectly and being able to understand bits and pieces of 100 languages," Dr. Miller explained to General Adams during an update briefing. "When you only know one language, you're stuck if you meet someone who doesn't speak it. But if you know parts of many languages, you can usually find a way to communicate." The lab was a flurry of activity as they prepared their first real test. They had received a small sample of the virus from the last warning station, carefully contained in a quantum field. Dr. Thompson stood ready with their modified protein sequence, derived from the most adaptable human immune responses they had found. "This is either going to be a breakthrough or a disaster," she said, her hand steady as she prepared to introduce their solution to the virus sample. Dr. Miller stood beside her, watching the containment field closely. "Either way, we'll learn something new. That's what humans do best. We learn, we adapt, we survive." The room fell silent as Dr. Thompson began the procedure. On screens around the lab, scientists from around the world watched, holding their breath. The virus was less than 5 days from Earth now. This test could be their last chance to prevent a catastrophe. As they watched the virus encounter their modified human proteins, something unexpected happened. The virus didn't just slow down or stop, it changed. The aggressive patterns that had torn through alien cells began to shift, becoming softer, more coordinated. It was learning, just as human cells had learned over millions of years, to communicate without destroying. The test results changed everything. For 3 days straight, the team watched as their modified human proteins interacted with the virus sample. Instead of destroying cells, the virus now moved through them gently, leaving them stronger than before. Dr. Miller hadn't slept in 36 hours, but he couldn't look away from the microscope. "We need to scale this up," he said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. The virus will reach Earth in 2 days. We need enough modified proteins to protect the whole planet. He turned to Dr. Thompson, who was already running calculations on her tablet. The protein sequence is stable, she confirmed. We can synthesize it in large quantities, but we'll need every medical facility on Earth working together. She looked up at the screens showing their global connections. And we'll need to convince the Galactic Council this will work. Dr. Wilson's quantum computers had been running nonstop, processing the successful test data and projecting the results on a planetary scale. The simulations are clear, he announced, pointing to the latest results. Once the virus encounters our modified proteins, it doesn't just stop being destructive, it becomes beneficial. It's like we're teaching it proper manners. The world's largest medical companies had already retooled their facilities, standing by for instructions. When Dr. Thompson sent out the protein sequence, production began immediately. Factories that usually made vaccines and medicines now worked to create humanity's universal translator for viral communication. A call came in from the Galactic Council. Their representatives appeared on the main screen, their alien features showing clear signs of stress. "You want to let the virus in?" they asked, their translators struggling to convey their mix of horror and disbelief. The same virus that destroyed 3 advanced civilizations. Dr. Miller stepped forward. "We don't just want to let it in. We want to welcome it properly." He showed them the test results, explaining how human evolution had prepared them for this moment. "Your civilizations advanced beyond the need to adapt to viruses. But humans, we kept all our old ways of talking to them. We're not going to fight this virus. We're going to teach it a better way to communicate." The council members watched in silence as he showed them videos of the transformed virus. Where it had once torn through cells with destructive force, it now moved through them like a gentle tide, strengthening cellular structures and improving their function. "Think of it like teaching someone who's only ever known how to shout," Dr. Thompson added. "We're not stopping them from speaking. We're showing them how to whisper." With less than 48 hours until the virus reached Earth, the entire planet mobilized. Military aircraft distributed the modified proteins to every corner of the globe. Hospitals prepared to monitor the population for any unexpected reactions. Dr. Wilson's quantum computers kept running simulations, each one confirming their approach. In the lab, Dr. Miller studied a new batch of test results. The modified virus wasn't just communicating better, it was sharing information it had gathered from other species. Within infected cells, they found traces of biological innovations from dozens of alien civilizations. The virus hadn't been trying to destroy, it had been trying to share knowledge, but its method had been too overwhelming. It's like finding out that someone who's been shouting death threats was actually trying to share the secrets of the universe, he said to Dr. Thompson. They just didn't know how to do it without hurting everyone. The final hours ticked down. Around the world, people waited in nervous anticipation. The Galactic Council watched from their distant chambers, many believing they were witnessing humanity's last moments. But in the Geneva lab, the team felt only calm determination. Dr. Wilson looked up from his computers one last time. "Everything's ready," he said. "The distribution systems are in place. Every human on Earth will have the modified proteins in their system before the virus arrives." Dr. Miller nodded, looking at the countdown timer on the wall. In less than a day, they would find out if humanity's messy, imperfect evolution had given them the tools to solve a problem that had defeated the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," he said. "Time to welcome our visitor and teach it some manners." The first signs of the virus appeared in Earth's upper atmosphere as a faint, shimmering purple haze. Everyone in the Geneva lab held their breath as their instruments began recording data. Dr. Miller stood at the main console, watching as the readings poured in. "Here we go," he said quietly. The modified proteins had been distributed worldwide over the past 24 hours. Now they would see if their solution worked on a global scale. The Galactic Council had insisted on maintaining a live feed to observe Earth's attempt. Many council members had already prepared statements of condolence, certain they were about to witness another civilization's fall. Instead, they watched in growing amazement as their instruments showed something unprecedented. The virus entered Earth's atmosphere, but instead of the explosive spread that had destroyed other worlds, it moved with surprising slowness. Dr. Thompson's eyes were glued to the cellular activity monitors. "The proteins are working," she announced. "The virus is responding to our communication protocol." In the quantum computing center, Dr. Wilson's screen showed the virus's behavior changing in real time. "It's exactly like our simulations predicted," he called out. "The virus is adapting its communication method. It's learning to speak our language." The first human exposures happened naturally in the upper atmosphere research stations. The scientists there had volunteered to be the first test subjects, knowing the risks. Their vital signs appeared on the main screen in Geneva. Everyone watched, hardly daring to breathe, as the virus made contact. "No cell death," Dr. Thompson reported, her voice steady but excited. "The proteins are acting as translators. The virus is successfully establishing symbiotic connections without damaging the host cells." More data poured in as the virus spread across the planet. Instead of the devastating effects seen on other worlds, something remarkable was happening. The modified proteins weren't just preventing damage. They were facilitating a genuine exchange of information between the virus and human cells. "Look at this," Dr. Miller pointed to a new reading. "The virus is sharing genetic information it collected from other species, but now it's doing it gently, letting our cells adapt at their own pace." He turned to the Galactic Council's feed. "It's not a weapon at all. It's a library." The council members chattered in astonishment as they reviewed the data. The virus that had devastated their most advanced civilizations was now peacefully integrating with human biology, sharing secrets of cellular repair and enhancement that their scientists had sought for generations. Reports began coming in from the early exposure sites. People weren't getting sick. Instead, they were showing signs of improved health. Enhanced immune responses, faster healing, better cellular repair. The virus was sharing everything it had learned from every species it had encountered, but now it was doing it in a way that could be safely received and integrated. "We did it," Dr. Thompson whispered, looking at the global infection maps. The virus was spreading rapidly, but instead of leaving destruction in its wake, it was leaving healthier, stronger populations. "We taught it how to communicate properly." The Galactic Council's initial skepticism turned to amazement as more data confirmed the success. One council member, their translator struggling to convey their emotional state, asked, "How did you know this would work?" "Our best scientists said it was impossible to survive contact with the virus." Dr. Miller smiled, tired but proud. "Because we never tried to be perfect. Humanity's strength isn't in having the best defense or the most advanced technology. Our strength is in our ability to adapt, to learn, to find new ways to communicate and coexist." Around the world, the virus continued its peaceful spread. The modified proteins were doing their job perfectly, teaching the ancient viral library how to share its knowledge without overwhelming its hosts. What had been seen as a doomsday weapon was transformed into one of the greatest medical breakthroughs in galactic history. Dr. Wilson's quantum computers were already processing the vast amount of biological information the virus was sharing. "This is incredible," he said, scrolling through the data. "The virus isn't just carrying medical knowledge. It has biological information from countless extinct civilizations. We're not just saving ourselves. We're preserving the legacy of species that disappeared millions of years ago." 3 months after the virus's arrival, the Geneva lab had transformed into the galaxy's premier center for viral research. Scientists from dozens of surviving civilizations came to study how humans had achieved what they had thought impossible. Dr. Miller walked through the crowded halls, still amazed by how much had changed. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session to discuss the implications of humanity's success. Dr. Miller, Dr. Thompson, and Dr. Wilson stood before the gathered representatives of 1,000 worlds, ready to share what they had learned. The virus was never meant to be a weapon, Dr. Miller explained to the assembled aliens. It was a final gift from an ancient civilization, a way to share all their knowledge before they vanished. But like any form of communication, it needed the right translator. Dr. Thompson stepped forward, displaying holographic data from their research. Our primitive immune systems, shaped by millions of years of viral interactions, gave us the tools we needed. While more advanced species lost their ability to adapt, humans kept every successful mutation, every cellular communication method we ever developed. The council chamber filled with murmurs as Dr. Wilson showed them the latest data. The virus, now spreading peacefully through the galaxy under human supervision, was sharing medical breakthroughs that had been lost for millions of years. Diseases that had plagued advanced civilizations were being cured using knowledge stored in the viral library. But the most important thing we've learned, Dr. Miller continued, isn't about viruses or cellular communication. It's about perspective. Sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the best one. Sometimes you need to step back and try to understand instead of trying to fight. A council member stood up, their crystalline form catching the light. Your species has achieved in 3 months what our greatest minds couldn't do in centuries. We called you primitive because you still carried the marks of your evolutionary struggles. We were wrong. Those struggles gave you strength we had forgotten. Back on Earth, the changes were becoming clear. The viral library had integrated successfully with human biology, sharing its vast knowledge at a pace that cells could handle. Hospitals reported accelerated healing rates. Diseases that had once been deadly were becoming manageable. Human cells had learned to repair damage that was previously permanent. In the lab, Dr. Thompson studied new data from their global monitoring system. Every day we learned something new, she told a group of alien scientists who had come to study their methods. The virus isn't just teaching us about biology. It's teaching us about communication itself, about the importance of listening before speaking. Dr. Wilson's quantum computers had been upgraded with alien technology, but they still ran his original programs. The simulations never stopped surprising us, he said, showing how the virus continued to adapt and improve its communication methods. It's learning from us as much as we're learning from it. The Galactic Council officially recognized Earth as a center of medical and biological research. Ships arrived daily, bringing scientists and students from across the galaxy. They came not just to study the virus, but to learn from humanity's approach to problem solving. Dr. Miller stood at his old desk, looking at the photo of his daughter. The dog in the picture had long since passed away, but its lesson about communication between species had helped save the galaxy. A young alien researcher approached him, their translator converting their complex language into simple words. "My species lost colonies to this virus," they said. "We thought it was death itself, but you showed us it was just knowledge, waiting for someone who could listen properly." They paused, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the lab's lights. "How did you know to try understanding it instead of fighting it?" Dr. Miller smiled, thinking of all the viruses Earth had faced, all the adaptations humans had developed. "Because that's what humans do," he said. "We survive not by being the strongest or the most advanced, but by being willing to learn, to change, to find new ways of looking at old problems." Outside his window, the evening sky shimmered with a faint purple hue. The virus, now a peaceful part of Earth's biosphere, continuing its ancient mission of sharing knowledge across the stars. Humanity had not just survived. They had turned a galactic disaster into a revolution in understanding. And they had done it not despite their primitive nature, but because of it.